All right, great. Let's call the meeting to order then. And do you usually have the flag salute?
No, we don't. We could do whatever you like.
Well,
Although I don't think there's a flag in
let's
here.
have well, we have a flag salute here, and so let's please stand and
Okay.
salute our flag. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Are there any opening remarks? Seeing none, can I have a motion for approval of September 14, 2018 meeting minutes?
Turn on
There's
your
a
mic.
motion.
Yeah, we have Jeffrey Blake, and he made the motion.
Was there a second?
Second.
We got a
Thank you. Now, I was not there at that point, so I'm gonna have to abstain, if that's all right.
Okay. So
With
if there's
that
no,
said, all those in favor, say aye. No opposition?
one abstention,
Seeing none. One abstention. Thank you.
or two, actually yourself and
See-
also Todd Campbell.
Okay. Two abstentions. Do we still have enough votes for
Yes,
the motion to move forward for approval?
we're good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Latorre. Folks, just bear with me because obviously I'm away from you and I could hear you maybe a second behind. You probably could hear me maybe 1 second behind as well. Moving on to action item number 3, review of follow-up action items, Mr. Latorre.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Perez, and welcome to Local Gov Small Business Assistance Advisory Group. Last month, or last meeting, I should say, Rita Loof requested a presentation on Rule 219. I checked with staff, and to date, staff does not have anything to present for Rule 19, but they are well aware that Rita does want this, so when there is some updates, they're going to let me know, and we will agendize that item. The next item was Mr. Avila requested information regarding Sriracha, and he's not here right now. So Nancy Thalman from our district, our general counsel's office will prepare answer any questions that he has. He's not here right now, so we'll skip that one. The next one was Mr. Avila had requested information on the sales tax poll that we did earlier this year. So we did provide this information to Mr. Avila, and it was emailed to him on October 2nd. And that is it.
Thank you, Mr. Latorre. Are there any follow-up questions or points from members?
So we do have one over here.
Yeah, Supervisor, if this is Bill Lamar with the California Small Business Alliance. Maybe I'd just like to make a point of order. If we could go around the room and introduce ourselves, since you're new to us and we're new to you.
Great idea. I'm having a tough time, quite frankly, seeing the cards just because of the situation. But yes, please, why don't we start from one end of the room?
Rita Loof, Director of Environmental Affairs for RadTech International.
John DeWitt, J. DeWitt Incorporated.
Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance.
David Rothbart, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts.
Jeff Blake, Metal Finishers Association and Small Business Alliance.
Nancy Feldman, Counsel's Office.
Derek Alatorre, South Coast AQMD.
Laki Tisopoulos, Deputy Executive Officer with Engineering and Permitting.
Todd Campbell, Vice President of Public Policy and Regulatory Affairs for Clean Energy.
Eddie Marquez, IRCA and Orange County Hispanic Chamber.
Good afternoon, Rachel Arizmendi, City Council Member for the City of Sierra Madre and Vice President for PACE Pacific Asian Consortium and Employment.
Stacy Garcia, South Coast AQMD. Elaine Hill, South Coast AQMD.
Is that everybody, Mr. Torre?
De Groeneveld, South Coast AQMD.
We're good to go now. We're good to go.
Good to go now? Okay. Thank you so much. And Mr. Lamar, thank you for that suggestion. I appreciate that. Discussion items. We have two items. Number 4, permit backlog reduction. Number 5, local government land use policies to reduce air pollution exposure from mobile sources. For number 4, there's no motion required, but staff will provide an update on the status of the permit backlog reduction, and I guess I can turn that over to, is it Leki Tisopoulos?
You got it.
Please, by all means.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. I'm going to give you a status update on where we are with the backlog reduction, permit backlog reduction effort. And I think most of the participants here, when we talk about permit backlog, they know what I'm talking about. And I don't need to go over the background, but for the benefit of the supervisor who is joining us for the first time, Supervisor, one of the persistent criticisms, I should say, that the agency was getting over the years was the pretty substantive permit backlog that we have been nursing over the years. So I was assigned to this position roughly a couple of years ago, and one of the principal tasks assigned to me was to reduce the backlog substantially, in fact, eliminate it. So we put an action plan together roughly a couple of years ago, fairly comprehensive, where we tried to identify a series of measures that will streamline and facilitate the expeditious processing of the permits and improve our production rates and productivity. The plan was set into effect at the initial stages when we look at our inventory, which was quite high, approximately 7,300, 7,400 pending applications. Roughly 50% of it was in the backlog, while the remaining 50% of it was basically an open business inventory. So we established for ourselves to reduce that inventory by 50% based on that, and we did our calculations, and we gave ourselves a fairly aggressive schedule, but realistic one, to eliminate it in 2 years. So where are we? So I'm happy to say that in 2 years, in fact, slightly less than 2 years, we managed to reduce that inventory by more than 50%, 51% to be precise, and meet our targets slightly ahead of time, under budget, and we are extremely happy about it. Now, we just completed what you are seeing in the slides here is our record as of the end of the second quarter of 2018. We just completed the third quarter of 2018, and I'm happy to say that actually our record looks even better. We are at 52% right now rather than 51%. And with where we are today, it's the lowest inventory of the last 30 plus years that we established. But we are not going to declare victory. We want to keep pushing the envelope a little further. We know that we are going to be going through the reclaim transition, and that will have some impact on our permitting. So we want to establish a cushion, if we can, to better absorb that anticipated impact. So one of the things that we did was improve our production rates. And essentially, if you compare to the permit applications that we have been receiving prior to the commencement of this backlog reduction effort in 6-month increments, and you go a year and a half back, you'll see the incoming applications indicated with yellow here versus the permit application actions that we have been taking within the same time frame. They were going neck and neck, sometimes a little bit further ahead, sometimes a little bit below, and this was one of the reasons why we were nursing that permit backlog. But as soon as we commenced the permit backlog reduction effort and implementation of our action plan, we managed to drastically improve our productivity indicated here, again, with the green bars, far exceeding the incoming applications indicated with the yellow bars. And that was the predominant reason why we managed to, how we managed to reduce the pending application inventory. If you look at our milestones or our targets, performance targets that we had established, the goal of processing 7,000 permit actions in any given year and processing 1,800 new permits to constructs, or PCs as we call them, for a given year. And in the last couple of years, we far exceeded those targets, as you can see from our slide. And along with that, as a means of encouraging stuff, we started recognizing our employees for the top performance specifically, or MVPs if you want to call them. And we had our first MVP from each of the 10 permit processing teams the first fiscal year, and we had another set that we just celebrated and recognized for the second year that we just completed, the second fiscal year, I should say, that we just completed. So in addition to moving up productivities and processing rates, we have made significant investments in modernizing and automating our permit processing. And basically our goal there is to improve service to our stakeholders, to our permit holders. So as a result, we wanted to develop electronic tools that would perhaps replace the current permitting tools. And I'm happy to say that we have developed one for the dry cleaners, where basically if you are an applicant, you don't even have to turn in a paper permit application to us. You can download your electronic online forms from the web. You can input your parameters. And if you are below the thresholds that we have established, you can print your own permit at your own office. You don't even have to interface with us. Of course, electronically, we are getting copies of what you get. And if you are above our thresholds, you can still use the tool, but submit everything electronically. You don't need to rely on paper forms anymore. So we have two additional tools, one for gas stations and another one for auto body spray booths that we developed. And I'm happy to announce that we'll be ready to go live with those two additional tools next week. So we are very excited about it, and we want to keep pushing this envelope. We are starting the second phase of development, and we want to move to convert all our paper forms to electronic forms. And we want to convert our filing and registration program to an electronic program. And with that, we hope that we can improve our transparency, the responsiveness, and efficiency overall. We cannot do this with all our permits. For instance, refinery permits, power plant permits, which are extremely complex, technically speaking. We'll probably never be able to develop automated tools, but at least for the simpler applications, the more cookie-cutter type applications, we hope that we can keep developing those online tools and making those available as an alternative option to our stakeholders. So under phase 2, we are going to be developing basically automated tools for boilers, oil production wells, negative air machines, and char broilers. And we are also in the spirit of improving transparency. We are in the process of developing an application status dashboard where an applicant or any public JOQ, any member of the public, can plug in an application number or a facility ID number and view where the application is, if it's moving forward, if it's gotten stuck, Why it's stuck? Is it information being expected from the agency? Is it from the applicant? They'll be able to see all that level of detail that I think will be extremely helpful. We hope that we'll be able to unveil this program within the next few weeks, if not months, first internally, populate it, and then in not too distant future, we hope that we can make it available, put it on the public domain. So we are extremely excited about what we have accomplished thus far. And one of the principles that we embraced right from day one of implementing this action plan was the continuous improvement principle. And essentially, we have been working with our stakeholders in developing those permit processing, enhancing modules, streamlining ideas that were brought to the table. And we developed this feedback loop where we kept pushing the envelope, and to the extent that things were working, we have been implementing those. To the extent things were not working as well as we anticipated, we started modifying things. So we have this iterative process that we establish, and plus with all the transparency and accountability improvement efforts, and also recognizing performance, we are trying to change our culture, which is probably one of the most difficult things to do in an organization like ours. But we are making significant strides, and we are trying basically to foster the culture of excellence. And one thing that we have been telling our staff is, yes, we have met perhaps our targets for the 50% reduction, but don't be satisfied with where we are. There's always room for improvement. If you'll search hard enough, you'll find areas to improve, and that's basically the attitude that we are trying to embrace and implement. So with that, obviously, we have all the intentions to continue our progress. We want to be mindful of the challenges that are ahead of us. And first and foremost is, of course, the reclaim transition that we know it's going to take a toll on us resource-wise. But we are getting ready, and we are ready to face that aspect. Also, we got to make sure that we are maintaining lower vacancy rates, just to make sure that we have enough firepower to process the permits that we expect to be coming our way. And with that, I want to stop and see whether you have any questions or any comments that I can address.
Thank you, Mr. Chisopoulos. Are there any questions or thoughts from the members?
So
Yes.
yes.
So,
I have some
Anatoly,
questions.
can you help me, because I can't read that, please?
Yes, sir. Why don't we start off with Rita Loof? I was gonna be chivalrous and let ladies first. Bill, go right ahead.
Gentleman first, huh?
I don't know in this day and age if I should should accede to her. Yeah. Lockie, I've got a number of questions. I was also at the Mission Inn when you made your commitment to the governing board and to us, the business community. What's the backlog today? Is it 1 year, like about 7,000 permits that you have working?
No, it's if you include everything, it's less than 3,600. So it's less than half of what it was when we started. But we are throwing everything that we can find in the kitchen sink in that number. If you'll exclude the permits to construct issued, which can serve as temporary permits to operate, actually the net inventory is around 2,500.
Ah, okay.
We have never been that low. Thank you.
Great. Another question I had is, was all this done with existing staff on a volunteer basis, or was there overtime involved?
There was overtime involved. Absolutely. We work our staff a lot harder than we're used to. So it was part of our action plan, and we explore both options to have voluntary overtime, and if that was not going to work, to move to mandatory overtime. Luckily, we didn't have to use the mandatory overtime. We only use the voluntary overtime, and only a fraction of the budget that we had set aside. I mean, we got the results pretty much, and I can't remember now how much it was, but less than a third, certainly less than 40% of what we had allocated for this effort.
And that was, you anticipated my next question about the budget. My recollection is that the board selected 2 years, and I think it was like $12 million.
No, for this effort, and I don't want to mislead you, I may give you the wrong numbers, but maybe that was on the high side, but we didn't even come anywhere near in hitting that number. In fact, by processing more permits at a fraction of the budgetary cost, we brought in, just in the first year alone, more than $3.5 million, close to $4 million. And I can't remember what the numbers were for the second year. I got to sit down with Sujata and figure that out. But that has a net benefit, actually, not a net cost, this particular offer.
So the $4 million was revenue that you could realize because of the permits that you didn't process.
Correct.
Yeah. So would that be, you had $4 million halfway through, was that another $4 million or close to that?
Probably it was a little bit less because, but it would probably close to that number, if not close to 3, maybe 3.5 for the second year.
Okay, so that's good. And then my last question is, when you say foster a culture of excellence, do you attribute maybe not having that or something less than that as accounting for the backlog in the first place? I don't know. I mean, your words.
Right. And I don't want to dwell in the past. I always want to look at the future. There is a variety of different reasons why we let that backlog run to the levels that it did. But one thing, at least that I try to do, regardless where I go, which program I manage, is to embrace that continuous improvement principle, because this is the only way that you can keep re-emerging, rediscovering yourself, and your team, and keep moving to the new frontiers higher and higher. And it worked in the past for me, and it's certainly working with my new team, the Engineering Permitting Office today.
Rita?
Thank you. Lockie, you've definitely done a good job on, getting rid of or reducing the backlog, because some of it is still there.
Right.
You mentioned the reclaim transition, and obviously that's going to play a role.
Right.
Do you envision AB 617 at all having a role or an impact on the backlog? Because that's very much in flux.
Right. It's too soon to tell because we don't know how that program will evolve, and if there'll be new rules coming our way that will necessitate additional permitting actions, it may impact us, but I'm not anticipating the impact to be insurmountable, because we are dealing with, relatively speaking, smaller communities, geographically speaking, in our basin. So whatever the permitting impact is going to be, it's going to be fewer applications, and I think it's something that we can definitely can handle.
Okay, great. David?
Lockie, congratulations on getting the backlog down very low. We really appreciate the effort. As far as moving forward, because now you kind of got the backlog down, we always talk about how to streamline further, and maybe the 617 issue is a good illustration of it's going to be challenging for a number of reasons for reclaim 617 issues, and it'd be nice to start talking about streamlining and having so the way I usually describe it is the haggling that goes back and forth on permitting. It would be nice to have it very clear from both sides of the table what the requirements are. I frequently talk about what the back determinations are or barked for 617, and having all that outlined so everyone knows what those rules are will be very helpful. And by the way, I did put a bug in Wayne's ear this morning saying it would be nice to be able to get the back staff increased or have them get enough support so that's not an issue for either side.
Excellent. Yeah, these are excellent comments, and rest assured, you have our commitment 100%, 110% to continue working collaboratively. I think you are a member of the Permit Streamlining Task Force Subcommittee, and that group is terrific in providing us feedback, and we have all the intentions to continue that effort. And like I said, regardless where we are today, the fact that we cross perhaps the finish line, we are not going to declare victory, because there is always room for improvement, and to the extent we can further standardize, further simplify things, and help things move faster, that's something to strive for.
Eddie?
Is the application process going to be 100% electronic moving forward, or is that the goal?
So let me clarify. So our goal is, once we convert all our forms to electronically fillable smart forms, to move away from the paper application submittal process to an electronic process. Okay. All right. I'm just about to break my mic. So that will happen. I mean, and it may happen as early as, we are anticipating those forms to be converted within a year, maybe within a year and a half, we'll start moving in that direction. In addition to that, we are developing the so-called online permitting tools, where you, as an applicant, can write your own permit, basically. Okay? That is a little bit trickier, more challenging effort, and we'll be able to do it only with the simpler application types, like the dry cleaners, the gas stations, where the decision trees are a lot simpler, and you can convert those decision trees into electronic format, into software. We won't be able to do it, with the refineries and the more complicated things. But regardless, even for those most complicated permits, we want to move to the electronic permit application submittal.
Okay, no other questions here, Supervisor Perez.
No other questions by members. I just want to reiterate some of the points that were made. Thank you so much for all the good work you've done, Mr. Tsouphoulos and staff. Always in any organization, the culture of excellence is something that we strive for, and it's always a goal. It's a mission, perhaps the vision, and obviously we will never receive that at 100%, but the closest that we can get to, the better, right? And I appreciate the efforts in which you are also recognizing employees. I think we need to do everything we can to value our employees, and by recognizing them with an award, some form of incentive, whatever it may be, only makes them want to work harder. You give them the objective. In my experience, working with different organizations, they will strive and they will do good work. And so thank you for moving those efforts forward with our staff. Reducing the inventory by 51%, I think is an awesome accomplishment. And as you mentioned, we have more work to do. So thank you so much for that report. If that's okay, moving forward. Moving on to discussion item number 5, local government land use policies to reduce air pollution exposure from mobile sources. No motion required as well, but Michael Cross, I believe, will be providing the report.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Perez, and welcome to the South Coast AQMD. My name is Michael Cross. I'm Planning Rules Manager here at the district. Here to talk about local government land use policies to reduce air pollution from mobile sources. Just a reminder that this agency does not have land use or siting authority, and we also have some limited mobile source authority. So it's kind of really important for us to find other ways in which we can be influential on these decisions that are being made in our region. Our agency does have an intergovernmental review team in the planning department that takes a look at CEQA documents and makes reviews and makes comments on those air quality analyses done on those CEQA documents. These are done by other government agencies and entities. We compiled an overview of those in a governing board monthly agenda item. So anyone can take a look at those that are made public as far as our reviews and status on the comment on those. Again, a lot of those projects do have mobile sources, so it's very important for us to be cognizant of those and to make appropriate suggestions, which we'll discuss today. Okay, so a quick overview here. We're going to touch on background. We're going to talk about some statistics as far as existing land uses here in our jurisdiction, some mitigation strategies, what local governments are doing, what CARB is doing, as well as ourselves. Okay, when we look at air quality health impacts near freeways, this probably isn't a great surprise. Concentrations do decrease when you go away from the source. This is true of really of any source, but particularly for freeways. And what we see here in this this chart here is we've got we have a freeway at a zero distance there on the X there. And then what we have is on the white lines there, these are both white and gray depending upon the season. But basically the bottom line is when you look to the right of that, it's a downwind, and pretty much particulate matter, this is on ultrafine particulates. Particulate matter pretty much in a downwind direction from a freeway immediately removes itself from that source and starts going a distance away. It does drop off on the distance, but it's important to note. Now, in the opposite direction, upwind, the wind is actually kind of keeping that pollution on that freeway, and it's only when those particulate matters get really quite small do they find themselves being transported in an upwind direction. This is important for us because, as we noted here on the right, these are a number of potential health outcomes. So again, probably no surprise, but does affect our lungs. This affects our hearts. This affects birth outcomes, asthma, breathing, as well as cancer risks. Now, there was a study done back in 2014 by the University of Southern California dealing with children's health. And what we're seeing here, we'll start on the left. So what we're looking at here is when you have a regional area that has a low amount of particulate matter, PM 2.5 in this particular case, and you are far away from that roadway, the functionality of a child's lung is pretty good. And they have, according to the study here, they have about 100%. Now, this changes as a region that has a low particulate matter level is near a freeway. We can see there's a dropping in the lung functionality. As we go further and you now enter a region that has high particulate matter emissions, like our own region, but yet you're far away from a freeway, drops even further. And of course, as you could imagine, the worst case scenario being in the high particulate matter region and living near a freeway. For a sense of perspective, that particular value is determined to be 10 times greater than the effect of secondhand smoke, I think in that sense, at 1 pack a day. So that gives you a boundary there on what we're talking about. Okay, some of the key pollutants. Toxics, diesel particulate matter, is a carcinogen, so that's of great concern. Volatile organic compounds such as benzene. There's also criteria pollutants. Any of our studies have showed from our near roadway monitors that these levels tend to be below the EPA standards. However, those standards are constantly being reviewed. And then there's other things like ultrafine. And just to kind of, remind everybody in perspective what we're talking about here. So when you take the diameter of a human hair, the diameter of a human hair is about what they call 60 microns. So when we look at particulate matter, PM10, you see that statistic around a lot. That tends to be the fugitive dust you can actually visually see when it's grouped together. That's PM10, so that's 10 microns. So it's 1/6 of the diameter of a human hair. Not mine, because I don't have much hair. Anyway, but and then you go down further as far as 2.5, we're getting smaller, and now about a region of 1 on the ultrafine. So we're talking about things that are really small. And the concern, of course, just like with PM 2.5, is that these are coming from combustion sources, that we're breathing these are not visible. However, these are getting into our bloodstreams and having adverse impact effects. So we're quite concerned with those. However, ultrafines are not yet regulated. However, the particulate matter rates can be reduced from these vehicles, we believe, as long as we continue keeping up the direction we're doing, the trends with cleaner vehicles. Okay, so let's talk about some statistics here. So the local metropolitan planning organization called the Southern California Association of Governments have come up with these statistics for our region. In 2012, the land use that's been authorized to be within 500 feet from a freeway they're small numbers, but they're still somewhat significant if we're concerned about, this level of exposure. About 4% of households have been approved within 500 feet of a freeway, and here they listed as employment, but basically places of work. For LA City in particular, the population within 1,000 feet of a freeway is 500,000. So where it's not a very, it's not small. Some of the documents that we've received, again, from other agencies that we reviewed when it comes to residential of housing within 500 feet have been 13% of those documents, those residential documents we've received. And we're reviewing. Okay. All right, so what can we do? So what we try to look at is mitigation strategies. Some of those things, of course, is reducing tailpipe emissions by encouraging or requiring, if it can be, zero and near zero cars and trucks. Zero, we sort of interpret that more of electric vehicles, battery operated, et cetera, and then the near zero when you're talking about things like natural gas or hybrids. So we list out some of those types there, and we have some pictures of those types of vehicles. And then also to consider ways in which you can reduce the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And you do that by encouraging local land use authorities to make smart decisions when it comes to approving various types of residential housing, mixed use, getting near transportation hubs, et cetera. Now, local government, next on. Continuing on with our mitigation strategies, other ways we can reduce, we listed down here on the left, are things like site designs, buffer zones, barriers, as well as building designs. Let me show you some examples. So in the case of, let's say, a site design, now on the left could be a proposal we would get, right? The yellow line you're seeing there is the freeway, and the design could originally be laid out just like we see here in this picture. So a residential building, they would like to have a nice park nearby, right next door, and of course parking for that building. But when you look at that, you realize, well, look, the residential building and the park is being immediately exposed to this freeway. Is that really a good design? Is there a way you can actually redesign that so you build in the design an automatic buffer zone? You want to have a parking structure, a parking area, so make that next to the parking lot, and the residential building and the park on the other side. Again, other ways you could do it, but you get the general gist of what we're trying to aim at. This is another thing that SCAG had noticed, was whether these vegetation barriers are being effective or not. So in this particular case, you see on the left here this effective. Actually, when I first looked at this picture, I was like, what's the difference, Do you ever play that game where you see the two pictures that look exactly alike and they tell you to find 10 things that are different on it, So that was kind of my test here. But what SCAG, when I was reading, was that they were saying that on the left-hand picture, what's good about this kind of vegetation barrier is what's creating what they call a wall. So the vegetation's going right from the ground up, and that's really important because they've done through studies to notice on the right where some of the trees are lifted up above that ground, that's actually allows for a conduit for those pollution emissions to get through. So that doesn't seem like much, but when you do those studies, that's the kind of things we're seeing. And then finally, high efficiency filters as well also helps in that building design to protect those indoors. Okay, so local government has been doing a lot of policy work on the LA County level. The Community for Development Commission will not fund projects that are within 500 feet of a freeway. So that's an interesting route to take. Instead of just sort of imposing something, restrict funding. On the city end, there's been a lot of activities going on the city end, on the LA City. So there's been some filters that are required on new buildings if you're located within 1,000 feet. Some of the new policy is these inspections would happen a little more frequently to verify if those filters are actually being installed. Now, some people might say 4 years seems like a long time, but when you're talking about a city of like 4 to 5 million residences, that's a lot. That's pretty frequent. So the advisory notices and then to all developers, the policy there that they're looking at is to, I think it's basically to increase the notification, what's included in that notification, to provide some suggestions for the development, their configurations, things like that we looked at, and to make them aware, because sometimes, developers they're not thinking on this level, right? So they're only thinking about maybe cost, what's the cheapest way to do this, maybe a design that they're used to doing, and just trying to get them out of that mode and that mindset. the reward for this particular effort is to not require those HRAs. The idea being that a lot of studies have already been done, already telling us already the effects when you're near to these freeways and what could happen. So we kind of they've already been seeing a pattern of those. So, and as you know, a health risk assessment is both costly and timely. So this was a way to sort of give them a carrot to take the time out up front and make those good land use decisions. Another one that we quite like here is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure to get those into new developments. A lot of times, and we saw this a lot of times we were developing the GHGs many years ago, was making good land use decisions up front helps us in the policy world instead of reinventing that and imposing new requirements later on down, which is more costly and more difficult to do. So to think about these things up front, getting the infrastructure built up front is a smarter way to move forward and yet still generating good policy. Here they're also looking again at a new policy to evaluate the feasibility of increasing that 5% to 20%. The City Council did approve those in August of 2018. Okay, the California Education Code also prohibits school boards. So schools, of course, being a sensitive receptor, young lungs, et cetera, are important. So here the board is ensuring that when you're acquiring that school site within, you could not do it, right? So it prohibits you from citing. And this is a big issue because the schools, as we know, get overcrowded. The boards want to have new schools for the kids, and there's hard pressed to find places that are available to purchase and to bring up to speed and up to code. So this is probably another little thorn, but it's an important one because once you've built that school, you can't necessarily turn around and move that freeway. So it does allow for mitigation. It doesn't apply to private schools, and it's definitely sometimes more stringent when you're dealing with just LA County, not just California. Some other areas more locally, the Western Riverside County Council of Governments has come up with a Good Neighbors policy that's available online. The county has also approved certain projects that require developers to contribute funds, and I think this is important because it sort of sets the stage of what other planning organizations, counties, et cetera, can follow suit. There's been some state legislation, and we're all probably familiar with the Senate Bill 375 years ago that required local communities to develop a sustainable community strategy that usually goes along with their general plan. And basically because the goal was to target greenhouse gases, but what it's also doing is it's again forcing these communities to kind of look at the way they are growing their cities, looking at the way they're developing their cities, the way they're configuring those cities, and again to think in a little different perspective than they might have done in the past, because now it's kind of forcing you to actually sit down and actually put some numbers on paper and ensuring that you're making the necessary reductions in the future, and it isn't just always business as usual. By the way, just as a reminder, the state agency, the California Air Resources Board, does dictate what those regional targets are. And so for us in this particular region, there's a 19% reduction from the vehicles by 2035. So that's their overall arching goal. The other Senate bill is 743. This deals with transportation, again, focusing on the bottom line here on mobile sources on emissions. But this one targets more on the vehicle miles traveled. And this becomes a whole new debate too, because when you think about vehicle miles traveled, people also say, well, if we're moving toward electric vehicles, then it doesn't really matter, how many vehicles are out there if no one's actually burning the criteria pollutant emissions or toxic emissions. So it becomes part of this debate. Speaking of the debate, the last point that we want to make there is that these land use planning groups are also making some challenging and sometimes competing decisions. Now, this picture here, we know that we've got a blue line, there's the green line, there's a freeway. So in this particular case, people have questioned, well, this is great, you've got public transit nodes, but you're also then getting people to come and gather and congregate right next to a freeway. So is that, people waiting for a train while they're there breathing in this freeway emission? So sometimes while you're trying to do a good thing, there's also some of these competing issues. Now, the state agency, California. Yes.
Is that the report?
Real quick, I got a couple more little quick two other points, CARB activities and R activities. Did you want me to stop, Supervisor?
No, keep going.
Okay.
You're
The,
done.
let's go. The California State Air Resources Board has come up with some activities. I've listed those here. Both a land use handbook. They've got a technical advisory, and they're going to be coming up with a large freight facilities guidance document. With regards to our agency, I've listed a couple of guidance documents that we have, whether it's our air quality management plan, our CEQA handbook, some issues dealing with school siting, as well as just some general guidance and for plans. And there I've listed out those the links to those particular documents. Again, our IGR team does look at CEQA documents. We review about 1,200 a year. We do provide comments about 350 of those. We also sometimes pursue litigation on some of these cases. This is not always the case, but we're really concerned about the way a direction a particular project is going. We make those decisions. We have conducted research on vehicles, on filtrations, as well as near roadway impacts. And then finally, a sort of a future pathway, we are updating our CEQA handbook. Back in 1993, we actually had like a physical CEQA handbook. This time around, however, we're looking things more online. We already have an online web page that we list out all the different suggestions and guidance that we would provide to outside people. But my goal ultimately is to have sort of a walkthrough. If you were a person with a project and you wanted to know, start from stage one, what do I need to evaluate when it comes to an air quality analysis? So that's our level of expertise. I feel we need to share that knowledge. Finally, we're looking into some of the things that other agencies have actually worked on, which is a CEQA Air Quality Mitigation Fund, basically funding. If you want to make that project go through, you provide some kind of funding, and we put that funding into emission reduction, other types of emission reduction programs. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Latorre, if you can help me, are there any questions or ideas from our members?
So yes, looks like we have one, actually two. Can we do Rita first this time? Rita.
If you insist. Mike, thanks for the presentation, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the Good Neighbor Guidelines. I think it's on your slide number 10, and what that entails. The Western Riverside County Good Neighbor Guidelines, and then also the developers contributing funds for air quality mitigation. How is that playing out?
Sure. Okay. So first off, yes, the Western Riverside COG has come up with this Good Neighbor Guidelines, which, by the way, we do have a link on our website, our CEQA website, to that document, so you can take a look at it in detail. But just in general, it's basically saying, if you were a new company, let's say, coming into our region, be a good neighbor, right? So distance yourself from sensitive receptors. Try not to look to try to develop your company, let's say, next door to a school. If you happen to be something that you're going to have some pollutants and things like that. Do your best to ensure that you stay in contact with your neighbors, right? Like notifications of things that are kind of going on depending upon your particular industry, or encourage clean industries like your own to come in and to be a participant in that community. So it sort of outlines those kinds of things and gives those suggestions to those coming to that region. When it comes to the I think you were asking about the mitigation fund. So this is a real new. We haven't really flushed this out yet. This is kind of coming along with our facility-based measures documents, right, our rule development, and the idea being that that maybe there's ways, instead of imposing some kind of like restrictive limits or thresholds or things like that provide other options. And we thought this, instead of just out in the ether when it comes to mitigation, be very specific to where those funds could be directed to, like locally or wherever those impacts may be, create a nexus to those. And we're not the only ones that are, that have, has thought about this. Actually, Bay Area, Santa Barbara, San Joaquin, Monterey, all these other air districts actually are already working on certain types of funds, and we're going to start looking to them to kind of flush out some of those ideas and how you would collect, how you would base the collection levels at, and where those funds would be spent. Bill.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. I've been a party to these conversations for years, SCAG's plan and AQMPs and everything like this. Have you had or would you consider a symposium of sorts for the people who actually bid on these projects, like AIA, Association of Architects, Architects Institute of America, Society of Civil Engineers, Caltrans, large companies like Majestic Realty, Watson Land, and get there, convey what you want to do, what the problem is, where you're headed on this, and get their feedback as to, with respect to feasibility, cost impact, is it workable or not? I mean, these people, make billions of dollars off of this, but I think, if you had their buy-in or at least their input, it would go a long way for you to in your structuring something that would get tangible results.
Right. So one of the facility-based measures does address, which I think where you're going here with this, is on the new and redeveloped facilities, or however you want to call it, residential, commercial, what have you, similar to the indirect source rule in San Joaquin. And I know that there's been a working group, and the realtors and builders, et cetera, have been involved in that. So I will take that back to that group to see if they need to move that up a notch and make it, more broader based and garner more ideas. Absolutely. I think all of our best rules have always been created based, and policies and programs, et cetera, have been based when you have more input. It creates a more well-rounded program. So thank you.
That's it on our end, Supervisor. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, Todd needs to
I
weigh in.
forgot Todd. Can't forget Todd.
Got snookered. Thank you. I have a couple questions with regards to the example of local government and land use actions and policies. Do you view the city of Los Angeles' direction pulling back the health risk assessments as kind of a weakening of current programs? I know we are getting a better understanding of the impacts, but I guess my concern is that I know with Measure H, just from a briefing, Clean Energy was a supporter of Measure H. We gave a donation toward that effort. And we were given a private briefing with a supervisor that was very involved with it. And it was packed with developers that wanted to complain about the 500-foot rule from the freeways and wanted to remove that barrier so that they could provide more affordable housing for folks. And so I guess I get sort of an allergic reaction with the understanding that you and I have about the impacts of freeway pollution on nearby residents.
Sure.
And so, when I see that HRAs are pulled away and there's it looks like they just need to review your suggestions and check the box, and that's it. Am I reading that right?
Well, clearly, Todd, I'm not going to weigh in on
Sure.
the city of LA's policies. I'm here just to present what those are and stay neutral in that. However, I do believe that you're right. I mean, what we are seeing and what I presented here today clearly shows a concern when you are located close to those freeways.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, from what I've been reading about this, though, I think their point, at least from the city of LA, was to reward only those that were going to ensure that they weren't going to be directly impacted. So I do agree, if they're trying to have your cake and eat it too, get your maximum development, plus try to avoid any necessary evaluation and disclosure of that would be alarming.
Yeah. Because, one of the things I think that one way to drive better policy partially is information. And if
Absolutely.
you understand what the impacts are for living in a certain dwelling and you have a risk assessment to back that up, you may decide to live somewhere else. It's just, that's why you have Prop 65, and some people argue how effective that is, but certainly, any type of labeling, where certain things are sourced, I think this is really important for at least we can make a decision.
That's right. I mean, that was the reason why those things came about.
Exactly. And then you had mentioned that under another slide, SB 743, about vehicle miles traveled, and I was a little bit surprised. You think vehicle miles traveled, the significance of that becomes less important if there's a ZEV transition.
Okay,
You
once
do-
again, clarification.
Yeah.
I was just mentioning with the debate on that. That's not my debate, but that was one of the things that was
Okay,
raised
I just
in
wanted
that,
to make sure that I
in that
didn't
Senate bill.
misunderstand because it's a
Th-
zero
we don't take the
tailpipe-
position on that. Yes,
It's a zero tailpipe vehicle. Doesn't mean the pollution goes away.
that's a good
So-
point. Yes.
So, okay.
What Todd's referring to, of course, is that to generate the electricity necessary to operate these vehicles, are going to need to come from another another source. So it is a good point. Unless, of course, those are powered by solar. But let's move on. This is another technology advancement.
Well, just so we're
Yeah.
clear, I mean, the SV
Yes.
100 is an aspirational goal in 2045. It's not a
Right.
legally required, and we only get to 60% by 2030.
Yes,
so,
that's true.
So let's be honest. Okay.
Okay, I don't see any others cards up, Supervisor. So next item.
Well, thank you, Mr. Latorre. Thank you, Mr. Cross. I appreciate the points made by members. And thank you, Mr. Cross, for your presentation. I do have a
You betcha.
question, though. I'm not exactly sure where everybody that's there, what areas they represent, but I was just wondering, the point that was made earlier about information and about a symposium, I think makes great sense. I'm just wondering what efforts are being done to inform folks out here in East Riverside County. I'm sure that folks out here would appreciate the information as well, and we just wanted to pick your brain on that.
Okay. As
So
far as
So I think what he's probably going to say is we could always do a better job, and we'll make sure that this kind of information is passed on to folks in the Eastern Riverside County as well as the other parts of our region.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Latorre. I did hear, Western Riverside County, and I did hear a lot about LA County, which is great, nothing wrong with that. But let's not forget the Coachella Valley. And so let's make sure that we have that discussion moving forward. I'd like to see what we can do to maybe bring a symposium, which was mentioned earlier, to our folks out here.
sure.
Okay.
Derek?
Thank you so much, Mr. Cross and members.
Betcha.
Todd-
Item number
Todd-
6.
Todd's got one more
written
item.
report.
Supervisor
sorry?
Todd Campbell has one more point.
Yeah, I was going to support your call for that, Supervisor, because if the valleys and outer regions can avoid the mistakes of Los Angeles and other more densely populated areas, all the better. And so I think your point is incredibly valuable in terms of relaying that information to the rest of the region, because if we could avoid those mistakes, that would be a huge leg up.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I guess that's where we would like to move forward with, right? We need to do our best. And so let's make that be heard, and let's jot it down, and let's try to create an action plan to make that happen. With that said, written report, number 6, monthly report on small business assistance activities. There's no motion required, but I guess a summary of assistance and outreach activities conducted by South Coast Air Quality Management District Small Business Assistance Office for September 2018. Who will be reporting that out, Mr. Latorre?
So that's just a written report that is submitted to, it's sent over to all of the members on the advisory group, and it's included in their packet, the agenda packet. So they have that.
Okay, so it's a receive and file?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Other matters, number 7, other business. Is there any
Yes.
member of this body or staff
Yes.
that'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to bring something up?
Yes, sir, we have Rita Loof.
Yes, thank you. At the last board meeting, there was discussion regarding AB 617 and the process by which trade associations would participate or be allowed to represent the community. And that issue impacts RADTech as well. We're a national organization, but we do have constituents here in California. And so we're very interested in participating. We understand that there's a lot of activity going on kind of behind the scenes between the AQMD staff and ARB staff. We heard brief reports of that at the Best Available Control Technology Advisory Committee. And what I would like to see for this committee is maybe a report on those activities that maybe we're not, participating in, but just a summary of what AQMD staff is working on with CARB so that we can be informed.
Okay, we'll make that a future item.
Thank you, Ms. Loof. Is there anyone else?
None over here.
See none. Public comment period? Is there anyone in the audience?
None here.
See none. Well, thank you. Our next meeting date is scheduled for Friday, November 9th, 2018 at 11:30 a.m. And is there a motion for adjournment?
You got one motion? You got a second?
First and a second for adjournment. I want to thank you all for bearing with me because I'm trying to catch up with you all, but thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with all of you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.